Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Google Drive GDL. Today we are going to talk about one of the apps in the Chrome Web Store for Drive. This is Draw.io. It's a nice collaborative drawing app using Google Drive. And today, to talk about this and give us a demo and talk a little bit of how it was implemented, we have a special guest with us today, which is David Benson from Draw.io. Want to say hi, David?
Hello.
So I want to thank you for joining us today, taking time. I know it's pretty late for you over in the UK, but thank you very much for the time, and thank you for building Draw.io. There's some things about the app that I think are going to be really interesting for this audience, particularly that it's an open source app and people can use it as a great learning example. But I was hoping that you could start us off with just an overview of the app and maybe show us a demo of the Drive integration and some of the features that you think are kind of the cooler parts.
Sure. Okay. Is my screen live?
Yes, it is.
Cool. So this is Draw.io. The really easy way to introduce it is it looks a bit like Visio in a web app. The sort of diagrams you can draw, things like flowcharts, UML diagrams, networking diagrams, electrical diagrams. There's lots of different type of org charts and so on. So it's probably quite familiar to somebody who's used something like OmniGraph or Visio. There are various online tools as well, like Glyphy and Lucidchart and so on, which do a similar thing. The difference between us and some of the more commercial tools is if this isn't a commercial venture. We release public source to the whole product. Commercially, what we do is we sell the underlying library. This is very much more a technology demonstration of the library. Now, up here you can see that I'm logged in as David at jgraph.com. And what that means is I'm integrated with Drive. When users first come to the site, they'll see a button here which says integrate with Google Drive. And prior to having the Drive integration, when you did save as, all we did is echo to the local file system. And when you did load, you'd open from the local file system. With the advent of things like Google App Engine and particularly Drive, it gave us the chance to build a usable application, whereas before, to be honest, we didn't really have the resources to take our library and our basic example to do the user management, the storage management, the scalability. We just don't have the time or resources. So when you log in with Drive, you're not actually going to see that because a pop-up has come up and asking me which account I want to log in as. I will actually come back to that pop-up. It's one of the issues that we had. Now when I say save, and I save as drawing one, for example, that will actually go into my, let me switch my Drive over to here, and that is drawing one. I can say that it's something a bit more meaningful if you want, just to prove that we are online now.
I believe you.
Sure. And those people familiar with Drive know the various features you have. For example, if you integrate with the Chrome Web Store, you can. No, it's not the Chrome Web Store, is it? It's the Drive SDK. It enables you to open directly from Drive back into the application. So what we originally did with Draw.io, it used to be called Diagramly for anyone who's confused, is when Drive first came back out in April, we took the .edit example and we integrated that in with our back end. Now that worked fine. There are various nuances with Drive integration, and a lot of these are listed on the best practices page on the Drive docs, and they're worth taking notice of because we missed out things like multiple account management, taking account of where the user wanted to open their files in which folder, for example, and the users came straight back because they really expected these to be in. Because, of course, with a local operating system, when you open something or create something in a folder, you expect it to be created in that folder rather than in the root. Mm-hmm. So we made a few improvements to the Java backend, and we had a discussion actually on Stack Overflow because we were really interested in a JavaScript client rather than having to go via our server. And fairly rapidly, a working JavaScript client came out, and as soon as we could, we tried to integrate it. We find it very interesting, the whole idea of going directly from the JS client to Drive. There's a number of advantages both for us as developers and both the users. I mean, things like privacy, for example. Now our data doesn't go via our servers at all, because before with the Java version, everything was going via our server as a proxy. And this makes privacy much simpler, it makes security much simpler. We never see the user's data, we can't lose the user's data. It's much simpler in that we don't even have to have sessions enabled on our back end. And compared to the Java application, there's a hell of a lot less jars that we have to upload every time we upload the app. So we made the decision a few weeks back to actually go into deployment with the JavaScript version. It looks pretty much exactly the same as the Java version, because of course all that's changed is the Drive integration. That's the point at which we switched over to the draw.io domain. Previously we were on diagram.ly, mainly because .io suffix is a lot cooler than .ly. Now, in terms of the authorization, when you use a server, you've got a thing called server flow, and when you use a JS client, you've got client flow. One tip for anyone who wants to switch over, I would suggest, is if you have the server flow in place, leave the server functionality in place in case the user's in the middle of editing. Because if they're in the middle of editing and they see all the back-end functionality exactly as it was before, they can carry on editing, and if their JavaScript client doesn't update, they can still come to the site after you've deployed and it will work as before. So we actually managed to hot deploy the app using the JavaScript client library without having to force a refresh or without having to have maintenance. So I mean, that was kind of coincidental. We didn't plan it that way. But if you are planning to switch over, for example, from server flow to client flow, it is better to do it all in one go rather than, for example, move the save and the load and keep the authorization rather than the server, because you do get that advantage. One downside of doing it is it's all very well the user gets improved privacy and security and so on. And one thing we didn't realise until after the event is, of course, we lost a lot of logging. When there was a problem on the server, most server-side implementations have some degree of logging. And of course, when there was an authorization failure and the user would email in saying that they have a problem authorizing, we realised that we had no logs to look at anymore. So it's worth considering. There are various implementations for, fairly simply sending logging data up to the server and storing it. You've got to be aware of privacy again with that. If you're claiming that you're ultra private with their data, and yet you're shifting stuff up to the server, you have to be really careful. On a slightly related note as well, in terms of the scopes for Drive, users are really quite savvy about the level of permissions that you ask for. I don't know if I can show you here. I think I'd have to uninstall the app. But I mean, when it asks to install your app, it will say, do you want me to be able to open and save files from all of your Drive, from just the application? Do you want to be able to do this when the user is offline, and so on and so forth? When you switch from server to client, the scope that causes the permission that we want to be able to edit your stuff when you're offline, that disappears, because of course if you're client only, you have to be online to make those changes. I think there's a slight misunderstanding about that permission. I don't think that's saying that they're waiting for you to go away and do something really weird with your data. But it uses just, I think there's a comment somewhere in the Drive docs, the less permissions you ask for, the more people will install. And that's definitely our experience.
Yeah, those are great bits of tips. One thing before you continue, where can developers find the source for this?
They can find the source on GitHub. It's under organisation JGraph, so it's github.com/JGraph. And then you see all our projects. Draw.io is obviously Draw.io. MXGraph is the underlying diagramming library, and it's a combination of the two that actually makes what you see. We do have some build scripts to use enclosure to put all the JavaScript together just to make the thing load a bit faster. There are instructions, and there's actually quite a long video on our G+ stream on how to do it. There's about a 25-minute video which explains in quite a lot of detail how to deploy your own Draw.io. And I mean, on this subject, actually, on GitHub, there's a piece of functionality that enables you to statically deploy what you have in your master branch on I think it's gh-pages, and this is gh-pages deployed as a static app. Now, of course, it is the app itself, and because it's using the JS library, i.e. no server is required, I can log in because no server is required to use the JS, and I would be able to then save that back to my, so I could call this GitHub, and that will appear, I really hope, in GitHub. So that's an example using a completely static site. There's no server. Nothing behind it, and actually, I've got a really geeky idea. I'll suggest that later on.
I was going to say. I mean, you could even try hosting this within Drive itself with.
Well, I have done that. So what I did is I put all the code onto Drive. I made the folder public. And you start getting into kind of meta situations. So we have this feature where you can say new from template, and okay, I haven't got the paths right, but a bunch of templates come up, and they're based on actual XML of our diagrams. So what I could do is load the diagram from my Drive instance, change it, and then the templates that appeared in the static deployment then changed. And of course, what I'd love for someone to do is to create a source control app using the JS client that's built into every deployment of the data it comes with. I mean that'd be great. I'd pay money to see that.
That would actually be pretty cool. So in the sources, is there anything in particular developers should be looking at for particularly related to Drive and authentication?
Sure. In the unhelpfully named war/js/diagramly, there is a helpfully named file called Google Drive.js. Probably could do with a few more comments, and I will give you a warning. It's the V1. It does the job. It works as intended. I think for the first refactoring, if anyone's wondering, it's Apache license. We'll put an Apache license at the top. I think for the first refactoring, what we're going to do is have a more formal state machine, because a lot of the errors that come back, you have to think about fairly carefully about what you're going to do and what state you're in when they come back, and so on and so forth. When you add multiple account management into the mix, it becomes really, really quite complex, and you have to consider, for example, if you've got a 401 unauthorized, it might be one that your session has expired, it might be two that you've logged out and back in as another user. So, if you're assuming that your session has expired, if you try and be clever and try and log back in and you've actually gone as the different user, you've got it wrong. So what we're going to do is follow a bit more of the state design pattern, or finite state machine, whatever people call it, and we're going to draw a pretty diagram using Draw.io, of course, but we need to implement curly arrows. We haven't got curly arrows, we're going to implement curly arrows for that, and we're going to formalize it a bit more so it's a bit clearer, and then if people have got problems, if developers, because only developers welcome to take the code and use it if it's useful. We may even put it onto a separate GitHub project, because I doubt people particularly want to take the whole thing in order to use it. So we'll probably have a refactoring, as I say, where we'll be explicit about states, we'll give them names, and we'll draw out where the transitions go. I think that will help people to deploy it themselves, and it'll help them to report bugs to us more clearly, and help it get it right in our head. to be able to sort out the few cases where we have problems. I mean, in terms of where we do have problems, as I mentioned, you can't actually see when I sign out and back in again, I get a little pop-up. One known issue is the fact you have to click on the pop-up twice in order to get it to authenticate. I believe that's being looked at. Another issue is because of client-side, when the token expires, when the authorization token expires, that happens after about an hour. Mm-hmm. So let's say you do a save and your token has expired, you will get a 401. It's unauthorized. Now, when you get the response back, you're no longer in a user event because you're in the callback of the authorization. And because you're not in the callback of the authorization, if you try and authorize, it will fire a pop-up, and that will be blocked if, like most browsers, you block pop-ups. So a similar case actually with the file picker. So I think this is written about in the Drive documentation, and it's well worth doing because, like everyone, we're far too lazy to implement our own. What we do is when we pick the file, we pop another really bad dialog, and we say, how do you want to open this file? Open in the new diagram, open existing drawing. And the reason we're doing this is because we want the event that's fired when we click OK to be able to open that in a new tab. Because if we take it straight from the callback of the picker, it will fire a pop-up that will be blocked. Now, we scratched our heads. Is it better to have a pop-up that's blocked and try and tell people to allow it or not? We're not really sure. We're not really user experience experts, and we generally post on our G+ stream, desperately trying to persuade people to tell us their thoughts on it. I mean, this is a bit of a first run, so I think we are going to polish various things. For example, when the session expires and you would attempt to save, and then you have this problem that authorization can't happen, it will go into pop-up. Of course, what we thought about after that is when we get the token, we know the duration for which the token is valid. So what we could do is set up a timer and then say after that timer has expired, if somebody clicks save, do an authorization first because we know it's expired. Then we'll have the authorization and the save will work, and we won't have some silly dialogue to avoid the pop-up.
Yeah, one thing you can try is, and I haven't looked at all the source to see if you're already doing this, but the JavaScript client has one of the options you can include is what they call immediate mode, and which is very useful for cases where you're expecting the user to have previously authorized. And rather than use a pop-up, it will use basically a hidden iframe with cross-frame messaging to check to see if the user is authorized, and if so, update the token. And that should work okay, even if you're not within a user-initiated event.
Okay, I think we might have looked at that, but I think there were problems with the multiple account management.
There may be. I think I've seen your Stack Overflow thread about some of the issues with hinting at the user ID for which one to use, and
I think
something we'll look at for sure.
I mean, is it usable in production? Somebody might ask. I think it pretty much is because. We probably need to spend a couple more weeks and we could iron out some of the issues. And a lot of our users are feeding back to us about the various issues. So I think, with a bit of ingenuity, the sort of last 10% of issues could be polished out to the point that you don't particularly notice. I mean, one slight issue is, as far as we can tell, in Internet Explorer 9, the library uses XDR, and that requires the protocol to be identical on the endpoint as whatever it is that sends it, i.e. SSL. So we couldn't get that to work outside of SSL. So on HTTP, we can get everything to work except IE9. So we had to put an SSL certificate on it to have IE9 working. And apologies to our Firefox users, we put the wrong certificate on. And you get a big warning when you pop up, but we are going to fix that, honest.
So, David, when you're not showing the app, if you want to talk directly to the viewers, it'd be cool if you stop sharing your screen so we can...
Okay, yep, it gets a bit boring.
That's it.
So this has all been really great information. Do you have any, wish lists for things that you'd like to see from Drive or from our SDK or just Google in general to make this better? You mentioned, we already know about some issues around multi-logon with the JS client. But I'm curious, what your impressions are of the Drive SDK. What could we be doing better to help developers like yourself?
For us to have actually gone into deployment with it, we're pretty happy with it. There's minor nuances which, like the double click on the pop up for multiple accounts. Other than that, I don't think anything else is insurmountable. Multiple accounts does make it a lot more complex, as I say, but that's kind of unavoidable. And anyone thinking about avoiding multiple accounts, I wouldn't, because a lot of users now have their business Google account and their private. I mean, I've got about 5 business apps for business accounts, and the private one. And users came back very quickly complaining about lack of multiple accounts. So, I mean, there's nothing particularly I would complain about. In fact, I was very, very happy when the JS client library came out, because I've never really liked architecturally this idea of always having to proxy via the server. I think the idea of going via the client is much better. Whether or not users understand the advantages of privacy and security, probably most don't. But I mean, it also gives a lot of good possibilities for offline mode. And one thing we're going to do is have a look at application cache and some local storage. Because the thing with Drive is, I've noticed that Drive has a better uptime than most cloud computing platforms, let's say, because it's probably a lot simpler. Because the more simple it is, generally, the longer it stays up for.
I'm not sure I would say simple, but
okay.
But we
looks simple.
We appreciate the compliment.
Yeah. It looks simple. Well, I mean, the server we have, for example, the thing is with the server is quite often it's a user error which brings the server down. We've had more outages because we've deployed something corrupted or whatever, rather than the actual platform going down. Now, if you're deploying fairly much static content, and you're using the application cache, so even if our server goes offline, somebody could come on with the application cache and they can read and write to Drive. It's much better continuity for the user. That combined with, say, local storage, if you went out of range on a device, and we do work on tablets as well. With draw.io.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask about mobile and whether or not you've looked into a mobile version that's either optimized HTML5 or native.
What we did is we changed a few of the handlers, we call them. We made them a lot bigger. We moved them around. I mean, it's not a massive change. It looks quite similar. It could probably do with a bit of a change. I mean, if you look at it on a 4-inch phone, it's pretty unusable. But I'm not sure how you could really make that usable without a huge change. But we don't actually use Canvas. A lot of people assume we use Canvas. We actually use SVG with VML on older Internet Explorer. Because we started writing an Xgraphical library back in 2005, and I don't think Chrome was around then, and I think it was Internet Explorer 6 and so on. So it's not that we're really retro. It's just when we started it.
This has been fantastic, and just great information for developers. I obviously encourage everyone to check it out. And also just want to thank you. We just started our Google Plus community for Drive developers, and you've been very active there already, providing some really useful tips to other developers. Really do appreciate that very much. And along with the time that you've taken today. Before we wrap up, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share with developers or tips, or if you had if there's anything that developers should know about working with Drive, that you can sum up quickly.
I would say that the JavaScript support for the client library could actually be more important than the Drive itself. I mean, as I said, I've felt for a long time this is really the way to go with web applications, and I don't really see any cloud storage providers providing something equivalent in terms of simplicity and the advantages to both users and developers. I'm very interested to see the way this goes, and it's developing fast. We considered supporting other platforms, but as long as Drive, and particularly the JS client, develops this fast, I don't think we'll bother, because I think this is actually technically quite a long way ahead of alternatives at the moment.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I think we will wrap up there. Again, thank you very much for your time and for for building Draw.io and your willingness to share that with the broader community.
Okay.
So that's all for today. And I don't know if we have our topic for Thursday, but stay tuned on Google Developers Live or the Google Plus community for Drive developers, and we'll keep everyone up to date as to what Thursday's topic will be. Great. Thank you.